Hello, I am Rainer Schulte, the director of the Center for Translation Studies at the University of Texas at Dallas. The center was founded in 1980, and we recently published a 40-year history of the center that is now available in book form. Today I would like to address my words to a book that I have known for many, many years. I want to use the book as a starting point for possible changes that could happen in the future in the arts and humanities. I am a professor of the humanities and I'm also a pianist, so I have thought a great deal of why this book, which is Johan Huizinga, Homo, Ludens. Still in the Latin form, Ludens comes from ludere and means to play. It's the present participle. So what we have here is a person who thought about calling his book Man Playing. I was wondering why I was so attracted to this book. Huizinga shows the form and the importance of play in many parts of our daily life. Obviously in the arts, in the performing arts, in literature, but also he shows it in law and some of the other professional organizations. So I was wondering whether I, from my point of view, could use the idea and the practice of play to rejuvenate the address and the entering into artistic works, especially literary works. Play per se has no immediate regular functions in our life. However, everything we touch has a sense of play. Whether it's children, whether it is a company, whether it is a group, etc. Wherever we look, the play is there. But the play has no ulterior motives. It doesn't ask for any money. It doesn't ask for any conclusions. It is there. So the first thing one can say is that play creates tension. And it seems to me that we should think more about the tension. As I progress, I want to create tension with the performance that I do. I want to create tension with a piece of literature that I read. And so the idea of play might be a new way of entering the scenery of interpretation. I think all acts of our daily activities are acts of translation and acts of interpretation. As George Siner said, all acts of communication are acts of translation. And I would like to transfer this idea to the notion of play. As a writer, one begins to play with the ideas, with the situation, with the atmosphere that I would like to perform and write. As a performer, I am continuously involved in figuring out how a particular piece of music was created, how it was put together. Our tendency is generally to say, this is what it means. And I think there we are outside of the realm of play. Play does not ask me, what does it mean? Play asks me to create the tension and to live within the tension that will lead to something. The result, the end of that, I do not know when I'm involved in the play. So in another sense, the play is unpredictable. And we know this from experiences of our own when we begin to play just in form of physical plays or in forms of artistic plays, dance, whatever it might be. So what I consider the function and the importance of play these days, that we move away from describing everything. The object that we have, we are inclined to say, this is what this object means. This is what this short story means. This is what this picture means, etc., etc. But what I would like to establish is to look at the notion of play, which is basically to establish a tension between me and the text, between me and the play. So I would like to see that we get away from the notion of describing, which in itself is always finite, to a notion and to a practice that will establish relationships. And here comes the word that I think the play is very well equipped to help us, is to establish a dialogue with the text and an interaction with the text. And as I do that, I begin to play with the text. I'm trying to reconstruct the play that the original artist, the writer, has put into the creation of the text. So my function is that, without saying from the very beginning, I want to give you an idea what this means, because meaning in itself, or a meaning, is finite and doesn't help us very much to go to the next step. However, establishing an interaction in the term of playing with the text will give us a chance to be continuously involved in the text. Let's say, for example, I have a novel. I can begin to play with the novel by looking at one character, and I play with the character of how that character has been played throughout the novel. So I'm getting a movement in me following the movement of the character that the writer has created. I can do the same if I look at a fugue by J.S. Bach. I can see how the fugue was put together. I move from one voice to the next voice to the next voice, and in doing so I get a sense of what the voice is, and as soon as the voice is juxtaposed to another voice or to another transition, then I have a new tension that I become involved in, and I live in it. Play means to live inside. Play means to be in a form of creating tension at all times. And that what makes the huge difference if we are able to think about play as a rejuvenation, as a revitalization of the way we approach artistic works, the way we approach essays, the way we approach the interpretation also of musical pieces, which in many cases people have serious difficulties because they do not know how one can approach it. I just think of all the difficulties we have had in beginning to understand what Stravinsky was doing in his music. This is only one case. One can may also talk about Charles Ives, The Unanswered Questions, which introduced a different kind of sensibility. So I, as the listener, I, who wants as the listener reinterpret, enter into the musical piece, I find moments where I can begin to play with the text. I begin to dialogue with the text. I begin to open the text so that it's continuously moving in my own mind, and I don't exit from the text, and I do not reduce the interpretation of the text to one definitive meaning. I should say that there's no such thing as the only definitive interpretation of a work. I should also say that there's no such thing as the only definitive performance of a musical work. A pianist is not capable of performing the same piece from one day to the next exactly the same. It will be a different kind of walking through the text, through the score, which is, from my point of view, another form of playing with the text. And therefore, the more I can revitalize my playing with the text, I will enlarge the interpretation from my performing point of view with the score. And this is what we also need to have to stop the reducing a text to one particular meaning, which in general has been for many years the function of literary criticism. And from my point of view, I now see that the initiative that came to me from Huizinga's book, Homo, Ludens, which he translated from the German himself, is one guideline to rethink of how we would like to approach, how we would like to enter, and how we would like to activate the interpretation, in this case, in my case I would say, of literary works, so that become alive in the mind of the reader, in my mind as the interpreter, and therefore each time when I re-enter the work, I have a different kind of approach, which I could call very simply, I reactivate another form of play with the text.